All right, welcome everybody to a special episode of our Puget Systems Podcast. Today we're joined by President and Founder Jon Bach. Normally, I would say, in case everybody doesn't know who you are and what you do, but I think we know who Jon Bach is and what he does here at Puget Systems. This is a special episode because one, it's not part of our normal schedule, and that is because we wanted to touch on a topic that I think is top of mind for a lot of people in our industry and kind of just in general, the tariffs that have been announced and rescinded and then announced again, and it's been pretty chaotic. You recently did publish a blog post about that, and I think there's a really good insight into not only just how it affects kind of the technology industry, but also I feel like it gives a good look at just the topic in general as well. So,
well, like how it affects, all the way down to the end user, how it affects everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but there was a little more detail into there that I hadn't even considered that we'll get into, but how even some of the parts that go into other parts can affect the whole stream of things. So sure. It's not just like the final product, but we'll get into that as well. And so as well as always, it's always you can post questions in the chat below, and we'll get those popped up, and we'll have those answered for you. So I guess just to start off, I'm going to share the link to your blog post in the chat for everybody, and we'll just kind of start at the beginning of it. What exactly is a tariff?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, yeah, okay, sure. I mean, part of my motivation for the blog post in the first place was to answer some of those types of questions, because it was just amazing how often I see it as misinformation. So I don't know about you, but like my social media feeds have been filled with this type of thing. So maybe this is the 100th time you've heard it at this point. But I think the biggest misconception a lot of people had prior to all this commotion was that the tariff it gets charged against like the origin country, and it absolutely does not. It's a tariff that is imposed when a product is exported to another country. But when we're bringing in, say like a container of power supplies or something like that, we're paying the tariff. So it is the buyer that pays the tariff. And then, the question then is like, okay, well then what? Does that get passed on to the end user? Does the buyer absorb that and just decrease their margins? But yeah, it's a buyer that pays the tariff.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something to make clear, because yeah, like you said, it hasn't always been that obvious. And yeah. I suppose another question that I kind of had, how is this different from, was it 8 years ago or so? Because we did have a bit of there was some of this similar, but I think at that same time, the crypto boom it was still kind of the crypto boom. And I feel like that kind of got lost in some of that. So how is this different from then?
Well, so like the 2018, 2019 tariffs?
Yes.
It's the same, in terms of tariff. The difference is that it's changing like every day. But yeah, I mean, those tariffs have been in place since that time. So, the tariff in general is not new. Okay. We've been operating under, I believe it's a 20% tariff since that era. Mm-hmm. And, there are some parts of it that even back in 2018-19, were set to expire here in 2025. And so that was part of my original blog post. So I put out this blog post on like March 28th. Mm-hmm. And that was actually to explain not what has been happening the last few weeks. That was to explain new tariffs that went into effect in February, March of this year.
Right.
And, all of those, the tariffs from 2018, 2019, and then the tariffs in February, March were escalating, but still fairly stable. Like in the course of it's only changing once a month. There wasn't, announcements happening each day. But yeah, okay. Anyway, answering your question, at its core, these are the same types of tariffs as 2018, 2019, except that now it's just changing so quickly that the industry hasn't even responded to the last three things that have happened, and yet another thing is happening. So it's more the uncertainty and chaos of it that's an impact on the industry.
Yeah, you're not joking either. I'm looking at the article, and there's, like you said, you originally published it on the 28th of March, and then just a couple of days later, there's an update on the 1st, and then another on the 2nd, the 9th, the 14th, and who knows what might even happen tomorrow. It's been a rapid fire series of changes, and that can't be easy for business, not just ours, but just in general.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, like the way that this ends up impacting the industry. So maybe let's talk about that. So like how it impacts the industry is, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. My camera.
Oh, got it.
Seemed to have unplugged. It thinks it did.
Nice. That's always the fun. Well, so the way this impacts the industry is twofold. Like in a short term, it just changes like what is the cost of components. And so, there's existing supply chains, there's factories that are already producing product. The product is in those countries, and it just changes the cost of the product. And back in the March 28th time when I published this post originally, that was responding to changes that went into effect in February and March. Mm-hmm. But the industry hadn't even felt that yet, because keep in mind, you have these products out it could be China, it could be any other country, Vietnam or Taiwan or Japan, and they have to get on a boat, they have to come all the way across the ocean, they have to get unloaded, they have to go into a warehouse, they have to then be sold, and then they go to the end user. Mm-hmm. And it isn't until that last step that the end user is affected by whatever that price change is. And so back on March 28th, we were just seeing the wave of price changes coming into the entire industry that was impacted from February and March.
Right.
And there were some other things in there as well, but that's generally the time frame we're talking about, is like in the order of months. And so that's in the short term. Now, in the long term, you apply these tariffs and it starts to impact behaviors. Okay. You might change where, so for example, we buy our laptops, they were manufactured in China. As a result of the tariff impacts, they moved that to Taiwan, and now we're buying laptops out of Taiwan. That's a big deal, because now they went from being highly tariffed to being very, very low cost, and that was a great move. And that's what those tariffs are designed to do, is to change where the product is coming from in the first place. Okay. And then, of course, the U.S. administration has the goal of saying, well, we want all that stuff to be in the U.S., and yeah, it can have that effect. But those effects tend to come out over long periods of time under very stable conditions.
Sure.
What's happening now is not that. What's happening now is more of like a negotiating tactic between two countries, and it's escalating and it's changing, and there's exemptions and then there's new tariffs. And the problem with that is, we as a company, if we have to find out, what is our cost, if we have to buy motherboards tomorrow, what's our price going to be? And sure. In a chaotic situation like this, the answer oftentimes is, I don't know. and a lot of the distributors at this point, even when the tariffs started changing so rapidly, they went into a mode of saying, lockdown. We are not selling anything. We are not taking on any orders, because we don't know which end is up. We have to give a little bit of time to figure all this stuff out before they know what their costs are going to be, and therefore they know what price they want to have. So in the shortest of terms, inventory here in the U.S. is very precious.
Sure.
The inventory here in the U.S. is the only thing that is like that we know we have to work with. Mm-hmm. And when it's gone, it's gone. And so there's a lot of I could call it hoarding, but there, strategic buying, or you have to be very protective of this inventory. And so anyway, when it comes to effects on the industry, it's not only the tariff is now in place and that's going to change the price of something by a certain amount. It's also, it drives massive scarcity, massive uncertainty. And so people start pricing that into the system as well. And sometimes that pricing impact can be even greater than the tariffs themselves.
Oof. Yeah. You mentioned something in there that I think is important to highlight, because it can take a long time for something to get from where it's manufactured to here. And the tariff doesn't actually hit until it gets to here, right? Like, you don't pay that if you're buying, like, say, the laptops, we're buying them from Taiwan. It takes 3 months to get here on a boat. Something could change between that time to receiving, and then you can get hit with the extra, right?
Yes, you're starting to ask questions where I'm going to say answers that are my best belief, but I'm not the expert.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, I mean, it gets charged during clearance on this side. I think oftentimes the clearance or the tariff rules is maybe the word, have caveats of like, well, as long as the boat was on the water as of this time, then then it's not subject to this new rate.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I do think it does have some impacts like that because some of the strategies we've had to employ so we brought in those laptops.
Mm-hmm.
And they were okay. So yeah, perfect story. So we had a bunch of laptops sitting in Taiwan, and of all the worst times to have them be there, they were sitting there on April 2nd. And we were all ready to like, great, our next wave of laptops is coming in. We're going to have our 5090s, and that's great. And then it was like 46% tariffs or something went into place. And so we had to say, whoa, just hold, keep them there for a little bit. We'll see what happens. And then thankfully time went past, and then we had exemptions come into place so that now they're at 0. And so we said, put them on a plane. Let's get them over here, not a boat, put them on a plane because we need to get them over here before something can change again. And so yeah, anyway, so timing, when stuff changes this quickly, part of the strategy for a company like ours that is importing some product can be, when do we import that product? And so sometimes it's queuing up things so that they're ready to go, but then understanding the situation is very unstable. There's going to be good days and bad days, and we'll just have to be able to react quickly when the good days come.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's just kind of the part of that. So I want to cover a little bit of, because things have changed a little bit. So where do things stand now, I suppose, and this is like today, this is April 18th, 2025. So,
okay. Again, fact check me here, or just in general, people fact check me, but here's my understanding. We have an existing tariff that was in place from the 2018-2019 timeframe. That's been stable. That's been in place for a long time. We had another 10% go live February, another 10% go live in March. We then had the reciprocal tariffs go live on April 2nd, and then they changed over and over again and turned into some crazy numbers, especially in China. And then an exemption for a lot of the computer industry went live it feels like just a few days ago. And that's where we're at currently. So currently we are at a lot of the specific components that make up a computer are currently exempt, but not all of them. To the best of our understanding, power supplies, air coolers, not liquid coolers, air coolers, and fans are still subject to tariff. A lot of those items come out of China, so it's not just that they're subject to tariff, they're subject to crazy high tariff, like unsurmountable tariffs. And that's where we're at right now. And so where we are the most precarious, I suppose, is with those power supplies and coolers and fans. There's also then the administration has also announced that there is now a national security review going on of the entire semiconductor supply chain. Don't really know exactly what that means. Like, is that only CPUs or GPUs? Is that also fans and power supplies? But basically, we know something's coming. We just don't know what and when and how. And so we are in a very uncertain state. But right now we're in a decent state. We're able to bring things in at a decent price. So we're already seeing, even after just a couple of days, things are starting to go again. Because really for the last 2 weeks, even if people had U.S. supply, things were very much in a just nobody do anything. There's too much uncertainty to know. So I mean, when all this went down a couple weeks ago, one of our first actions was to take notice of what we have right here on the shelf, take notice of what we can work with our supply partners to bring in. And that's, again, what I was saying of that's because in this time, U.S. supply, U.S. inventory is very precious. That's the one thing that we know we can count on when it comes to delivering things out to our customers.
Right.
And then we started the long task, and huge shout out to our supply chain team for all the work this takes, the long task of just going vendor by vendor. So like, okay, Azus, what are you doing? Gigabyte, what are you doing? Noctua, what are you doing? And just down the line. And, everyone has a different strategy. Everyone has a different approach. And, our goal is, we just got to keep business going. We got to keep our customers outfitted with the technology that they need. Right. And we can't do that at just like, everyone raise pricing 50%. Like we can't do that. But we also know that, price changes are coming. So we had to put a lot of strategy in place for like, how do we change our price and when?
Sure. Actually, that's a great point. That I think is probably one of the best parts about the blog post you did, is not just the explanation of the tariffs and whatnot, but also being so open and transparent about what we're doing to handle this situation. And so I guess what are some of the shorter long-term strategies that we are taking to help just make this a little easier, I suppose, for our customers and for ourselves?
Well, there's a perfect question from YouTube of, do we have a threshold in terms of cost absorption? Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect.
That's part of our strategy. So, so a couple of things. Like one, when this initially all started off, one of the reasons why I posted this in the first place is because we have a weekly product and purchasing meeting where we synchronize on topics kind of like this, but not tariffs isn't the normal topic. But Tyler, who's here in our team, has done a great job of deciphering all of the HTS codes and the import regulations and whatever, and distilling that into like an internal Puget of here's what you need to know. And I felt like I was very well taught in those times, and just wanted to get that information out because I felt like the industry in general could use a little bit of clarity in the process. Yeah. So that blog post was like, you could almost think of it as like it was. In the beginning, I'm writing to ourselves, of just trying to make sense of this whole thing internally at Puget Systems. But as is the case with a lot of things, it's like, well, why stop there? Let's contribute this out into the community. And so that was the beginnings of the blog post. That's just clarity on like how components are affected. There's another layer that exists just internal at Puget Systems, and that's just our internal strategy of like how it is that we are responding to this in general. And, I won't bore people through the whole 7 pages of the document, but there's a guiding principle here. The guiding principle is we know we're going to have changes in our costs as a result of this. Those have to be passed on to the customer to some extent at some time, but we also want to provide as much stability as we can in this process. And so there is a threshold in terms of like, we will absorb up to this amount. And certainly when we've provided quotes out to customers, we don't want to just say, almost every day, all quotes are expired, start over. Sure. That's not, we just can't. And frankly, some of our customers, they're working on annual budgets. They're doing a project over many months. We had one customer that needed a very large project quoted for May. What's our cost in May? It's really tough to do. And so we want to provide as much stability as we can. And so we have thresholds in place where, let's say, like a stick of memory goes up by a certain amount of cost. We'll absorb up to a certain threshold, and it tends to be something in the range of like 10% of the cost of the system, something in that range. Like the nuance, I don't really want to get to so much here, but it's something in that range, and that's at the cost per like component. But then we also have a vetting we need to do at the time that we have an order that's placed, because an order can be made up of lots of things that aren't affected or lots of things that are affected. And sure. Each one, it could be a death by 1,000 cuts, right? Each one might not be that big a deal, but can we still survive? Can we still run our business on the result of all of those things? And so we have another one that is vetted, that's at the computer level, that's at the 10% range, that assures that we're still good to go on the whole computer order. But that's like our last safety net, because the last thing I want to do is quote a customer, have them go through all their approvals, have a PO get cut, get it issued to us, and then we say, oh, never mind, we can't honor that price anymore. So that's our last resort, and that's only if something really changes big time. But I think we're only, frankly, in a couple days into doing that, because we had to, in the very beginning, we had to take some guesses as to what our pricing would do, because we knew the big sweeping tariff changes that went in place we had some pretty good intuitions just based on doing this for 25 years of what that would do to pricing. But those estimations over the last even couple days are being replaced by actual costs that we're actually getting quoted by our suppliers.
Okay.
So you're going to see, like, if you look, like, put our website under a microscope and look at our pricing day by day, you'll see that there was like this kind of general uplift that happened based on like what we knew was going to happen, and that tended to be in this like 50-50 state from what we actually thought was going to happen. We didn't want to we didn't feel like it was right, and we didn't feel like it was even accurate to just raise our pricing by that amount, but we knew our pricing was going to go up, so it went up a bit. And now that we've had more time to get into every supplier and every part more granularly, one by one, that pricing is getting replaced by actual pricing that we know is going forward. And so you're going to find that like some things go up, some things go down, but it's like it's coming into focus. It's getting more locked in. But the challenge was every time a couple of days went by and a tariff change happened, it's like everything started over again.
Right.
So thankfully now we've been, is it 4 days? 4 days since our last incident. And so there's been a little bit more time for that to clarify.
So I want to grab, this is another good question from BNT. Yes, if the China tariffs are here to stay, would it be viable to set up a reroute of parts from China to Taiwan and then US, or alternatively setting up a satellite office in Canada, et cetera? And that kind of touches on another thing I wanted to mention, that China in particular is very unique. I think a lot of people tend to think of China as basically all of mainland China, and then also a big chunk of Southeast Asia. They kind of lump Vietnam and Taiwan and some of those places all together as China. And so does that make a difference? Would something like that make a difference? Is it country of origin or?
Yeah, it's not. It's country of manufacture.
Okay.
So you can't just have the boat stop by Taiwan on the way to the U.S. and have it affect. Now you can. It's okay. This is another place, big old asterisk of like, I don't actually know what I'm talking about here. But it's where that final assembly happens. Okay. And so you can have ingredients to your final product that are made in different areas. But where that, final like actual assembly happens. Now I'm sure there's rules around, not gamifying that. But that's where we were able to have some things move to Taiwan. It didn't mean that the entirety of the supply chain is now Taiwan, but that product is now considered manufactured in Taiwan, and that makes sense. Origin.
That makes sense. Like you said, like with the laptops, they were being all assembled and put together in China, but then they moved some of that to Taiwan. I'm sure some of the components are made all over the place, but the final product, what we're buying, the sum total is Taiwan, and that's the end result. That's the tariff that we end up with. And
that's a similar approach to like, okay, are our computers made in USA? And there's TAA compliance, and there's this like transformative event that has to happen. So our computers are largely, there's some that aren't, but largely considered made in the US. Mm-hmm. And that's because we're putting them together right out there. It doesn't mean the motherboard was assembled from raw materials here in the US. It just means that last transformative event happened here.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel, again, it's another good point to make very clear. In the article.
But to more on that question though, but there are interim steps. So like you could have sub-assemblies created in China. And this was some of the strategy that we saw from some of the supply chain was, all right, still make some of the panels and some of the boards and some of the circuits and cables and stuff in China, and then put them on a train, put them on a truck them over to Vietnam, and then have a final assembly there, and then country of origin is Vietnam. Again, I'm sure there's rules around like how far you can take that before like, now you're just playing games. Sure. But yeah, I mean that is like the lowest barrier change that like the industry as a whole could do, and that's why like laptops got moved to Taiwan. Ultimately, though, like the big blow to that was when the reciprocal tariffs went in place, and now Vietnam was 46% tariff. It blew up all of that, and that sent the industry into quite a bit of chaos of like, oh, now what? Because the administration's end goal with all of this is to try to drive all of that to the U.S. Mm-hmm. But as somebody who's been over there and toured places and then compared that to infrastructure we have in the U.S., that's going to take a long time, and it's going to be really difficult to do for a number of reasons. One is just cost of labor, just cost of living and stuff is just different in these countries. But also, man, you could drive in 100 square mile area in like the Guangzhou like area or Shenzhen area of China, and it's just here's where all the cables are made, and here's where all the chassis are made, and here's where all the power supplies are made, and it's this whole like ecosystem community built. It's not just a matter of like moving a factory to. It's a matter of like moving an entire apparatus from one country to another, which can be done, and with enough economic forces in place, will be done, but not quickly. That's going to take a long time.
Yeah. Wow. It's bringing up images of, there's a video game Factorio. It's all interconnected and things like that. There's a question here from YouTube back to gaming. Taiwan has voiced their intention to reach a 0% tariff agreement with the U.S. How beneficial would this be if it were to happen?
I mean, I think beneficial, right? I don't know.
Think so.
I don't think I have a lot of what I can comment on is like what the effects of what we've seen have on the computer industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you start asking me what is the geopolitical strategy in all of this, I'm just another opinion. I don't have a lot to contribute there. That's fair.
I like this. This is a good question too. Very personable from BNT. Thanks for answering. Last one. I'm sure all this uncertainty is stressful for everyone in Puget. What impact might this have on day-to-day running of the company and keeping the morale up?
Oh man, I don't know. What do you think, Houston?
I think John, you're a wonderful boss. I think being open and transparent with the blog posts and internal communications is the best thing that we can do. You don't ever hide any of the. I think you do a really good job of insulating the people down below from what I imagine is a very stressful part for being the guy at the top. But balancing that with being clear and open with what we're doing about this, because we've hit some interesting times in the past too. 2008 was kind of crazy. Finding GPUs when the crypto thing was going crazy. And that it can't be easy for any of us from the bottom up. And I think you do a really good job of keeping us informed of the plan, both internally and publicly.
Yeah, I think that like, okay, there's something about like challenging times that tend to get people to rally together, and that part I actually, is it weird to say, like enjoy? I like that we come together in tough times, even if it'd be much better if we just didn't have the tough times. There's some extent where like kind of this feels a little COVID like we've almost been through this a little bit in terms of, supply chain got really messed up during COVID, and supply chain is getting really messed up now. So there's some things that like we feel like we're a little bit more experienced this time. So there's a little bit less stress if you've seen it before. It doesn't change the fact that it's a bunch of work and it's a bunch of uncertainty, but like I don't go home at night carrying any angst over the big dollar decisions we made that day. That we've been doing for 25 years. We'll have some, things that we made mistakes and we could have done better, but I don't carry a lot of stress over that. Where I think a lot of the company carries stress over is if we maybe don't agree on something, on how we should react in a certain situation. That internal tension isn't fun. And then the effect it has on customers. Really feels bad to tell a customer, hey, all that stuff we talked about with you the last couple of weeks, all of it is now totally messed up. And that's part of the reason why we're taking the strategy we are on, trying to find as much stability for our customers as possible, but we're not at 100% stability. And for our sales team and the people putting together these deals and the people that have like formed relationships with customers, that stress on the customer is probably our biggest source of stress. And that ends up getting carried through the rest of the company, rightfully so. Like that's a pain we want to feel, but it's a real stress. Something that we also have to like navigate as a company is, there's situations like this. You end up with like everything comes out in the end. So if we absorb some part of a tariff, like the money comes from somewhere. We're not like this, we're not rolling in money here. And so it has to balance out. And you don't want to get into a situation where like, one customer's bad fortune is being paid for by another customer's good fortune. And those are the types of decisions that are more stressful for us to make, where like, all right, we bought up a bajillion power supplies 2 months ago. Those are now worth a whole lot, in that the cost of power supplies are more up. And is it, I don't know what the right word is, like, what is the right thing to do in terms of pricing our product so that if you happen to buy this one thing we happen to have, now you get a good price, but everyone else gets a bad price because those are things we didn't have in inventory. So we kind of have to navigate this like almost guilt that comes along with, if our pricing is set with like a good high level direction that we know is fair at a high level, there's still going to be individual situations where like this one is really terrible for us, this one's really terrible for the customer, this one the price comes out higher, it comes out low. Like talking through each of those scenarios can be stressful internally, like how to keep the big picture even though this one scenario really sucks.
Yeah, I think that hit it really good.
Okay, that was
yeah. In the article, you mentioned June 1st, and
what's happening?
That was my first hearing about that particular date. And again, that might not mean a whole lot given how things can change very quickly. But I suppose just in a general sense, then what does the future kind of look like? What are we anticipating in the next 2 or 3 months?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me answer that more like holistic question. What are we expecting over the next 2 or 3 months? So, I mean, okay, but starting with the June 1st thing. So when I originally built the post, keep in mind, I was talking about the February and March changes, and there was one more looming change, and there still is. And that's that there were some tariffs put in place in 2018 and 19, that there were exemptions put in place for computer components and probably other things, but there were exemptions put in place. And those exemptions are set to expire on, I think it's actually May 31st or the end of May this year. And I believe that's going to add like another 20% to almost everything. Don't quote me on that, but it'll add 25% to a number of things. And that was like the next big thing coming when I wrote this post originally. Now, that still is a thing. Like it's still there. Nothing's changed. But it almost feels overshadowed a little bit by like the uncertainty of what else might happen between now and then. Almost feels more consequential. But let's not forget that even amongst all this chaos going on the last few weeks, this June 1st thing is still looming. So that's definitely something we know. Now, that exemption has, I believe, repeatedly been pushed back or rescheduled or deferred. And so there's still some, I don't want to call it expectation, maybe hope, that it will be extended or deferred again. But in the pattern of things that's been going on the last few weeks, I don't know that I hold out a lot of hope for that. So we have more waves coming. The other wave that we have coming is just an announcement of like a whole national security review of the whole semiconductor industry. That'll do something too. We don't know what that is. So those are the two. Like we have a one known unknown and one unknown known. I don't know. There's pieces that we do know and don't know, but we just know more stuff is coming.
Was that a Donald Rumsfeld reference?
No, right there? Oh no, not intentionally. I don't know. I made it up. The other thing that we have that is coming is, keep in mind again that it takes many months for this stuff to get all the way through the supply chain and have the end effects known, with a little bit of caveat there. Like at this point, everybody in the industry is hyper aware of things going on. And so companies are being more proactive in price changes or like strategy changes or inventory changes. And so by no means has the dust settled on all this, but probably a lot of that stuff, even though normally would take many months, is going to be more in the matter of like many weeks for some of that to be settled out. So there's still a whole lot of price changes to be made in the industry. Mm-hmm. You should expect that, and it's probably going to only trend in the upward direction, but it's hard to say. And then we have the June 1st thing, and that is almost surely going to be price increases if everything holds as it stands. So we have a ways to go. We're definitely not out of the woods. If anything, we're just in this like eye of the storm. Like things are quiet right now, but there's more coming.
Sure. Well, I guess then with all that said, what is your advice for some of the people who not necessarily are customers indirectly, but as what advice do you have for some of that?
You know, I was talking with somebody. There was like a reporter I was talking to, and they asked the same question, and I gave two pieces of advice, and I think I would add a third to it now. At that time, I said, as much as I hate using any like situation as a like buy now message, kind of is like if you know you're going to need a computer, we're in the eye of the storm right now. This is a good time to get that computer purchase done. If you don't need it, if this is like these are upgrades, but your computer's still running fine, like even today, you're going to be paying like a good 5 to 10% more than you would have a month ago, and so it's a good just wait. But I think I would add to that it doesn't necessarily mean buy now. I think what it actually means is plan now. Because
Okay.
especially with our types of customers, though I guess this isn't true everywhere. Like if you want to go down to Best Buy and buy a laptop, no, you should just go now. But if you're working with a company like Puget, doesn't have to be Puget, but any company like Puget, you could say, I intend to be buying 200 computers over the next 2 quarters. It would be with these kind of specs. Puget especially doesn't have to have a guarantee of that. I mean, we prefer it, but we don't have to have a guarantee of it. Even knowing that that's the intention means we can start to line up that supply chain for better or worse. Like when tariffs are like either 145% or zero, what we can do then is wait for a day when it's zero and we can make sure we have the right supply. If I could have anything I'd want, it would be, well, we're just going to buy 6 months of supply of everything right now, but we can't do that. That's way too much. So we need to be more strategic with like, okay, we're going to stock up on these specific things because that's where we know the need's going to be. Mm-hmm. And so, that makes me feel a little bit better than giving a like, everyone should buy now message. It's like, everyone should plan now.
Sure.
And that really helps us. And that frankly, that's the same approach we take for almost any sort of uncertain situation. Mm-hmm. Given enough time, we can solve almost any supply problem. It's when you come to us and say, we need 25 workstations for our new hire starting next week. That's a real rough time. Give us a little time. And one way to do that is just to talk to us.
Yeah, right on. I think that kind of covers, I think, the whole topic, really. We covered. Yeah, I think so. Is there any other things you want to express to the people out there who either watching this now or in the future?
I think the other thing to think about with these tariffs is, so you have some things where, all right, these laptops are now tariffed at 20%, so they just go up 20% in cost. There's other things where they're not actually tariffed, but there's still effects, and there's a couple different ways that could come out. One could be if some of the like raw materials or some of the ingredients to build those components or to build those items. So let's say this is not a real example, but let's just use it like a motherboard. And let's say this motherboard is actually built in the US, but the capacitors and the memory chips or whatever did have to come into the US. Well, those items are going to be tariffed, even if the end product is not tariffed. And so it'll still have a price increase. It's just not going to be like a 20% increase. It'll be an increase in whatever the impact was on those components. So that's one thing to think about, that it's not just the items being tariffed. It's the entirety of the supply chain above and below that's also impacted. So, I mean, it's going to hit almost everything.
Right.
The other thing that it does is it drives scarcity, and that's a bad time for the computer supply chain in general.
Yeah. And
that we've been like crypto, AI, COVID, like that we've seen a whole bunch of times. And what ends up happening, and I guarantee this is why like distributors on April 2nd shut off sales, because I guarantee what happened was on April 2nd, 5 minutes after the announcement, you got scalpers buying up GPUs everywhere. And then their only intent is just wait a couple of days for the price of everything to go up 20% and then sell them on whatever outlet. And so the distributors are trying really hard to protect the supply for the more like legitimate or like long-standing customers and like channels of sales.
That's nice because they could do the same, honestly.
Sure, they could raise their price. Yeah. So yeah, but I guess okay. that's just with the supply that was right there on the ground right then. Put yourself in the shoes of, say, a Zeus. A Zeus is making stuff all over the world. They have factories all over the world, and they're importing into the U.S. They're importing to all the different countries of the world, including the U.S. And these big, massive, like 25%, 35%, 46% tariffs went in place. First thing they did was pause everything. Not necessarily pause the factories, but they're going to stop the exports. And that has shut off the flow of inventory coming to the U.S. And those boats take a number of weeks to get across the ocean, and so we haven't felt that yet. We're only going to start feeling that really in the next coming week or so. And that's going to drive a whole different wave of pricing changes, or not even pricing changes, but just disruption in general. And that's one of the biggest costs of this, like of a reality that changes every couple of days, is everyone is just on perpetual pause until things stabilize, and then very tentatively things start to open up again, but with a lot of pain, because if another change were to go into effect, then everything is shut back down again. And so that can have just as much an impact on things as the tariffs themselves. So that's been a part of our strategy, is to ensure that, like, the supply chains we have set up, either if it's just like inventory we have out there right now, or if it's like purchasing agreements and relationships we have with distributors or with manufacturers. It's just making sure that in all of the needs that they have to fill, we've carved out an agreement for our piece, so we know we can take care of our customers.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that's one of the best things about Puget Systems and the philosophy that you've built into the company at its core, is the relationship part. Because I know through the tough times that I've been with the company, I know that it has been those relationships with the people who work at the distributors, or the people who work at the manufacturer, the companies that we get parts from, that have really helped make this a lot smoother for us in comparison to the industry as a whole. And totally. I think that's really cool.
We're going through kind of a honing or a better articulation of our company values, and I'm working on that like right now. And the number one is relationships. And how to articulate that has been a interesting challenge. And one of the ways I articulate that is to say that, like, we bring out the best in people through personal connections. I just think that, like, how you interact with somebody is, frankly, can be even like motivational to someone in bringing their best. But also that, like, a relationship transcends any one transaction. I would prefer to pay $5 more per motherboard if I knew that meant that particular supplier didn't see me as like a scrupulous, I'll take anything I can from you type of person, because then we have that more stability, we have that more shared understanding. One of the reasons, honestly, why Puget Systems isn't the like most economical provider, is because that sort of like stability and long-term view does cost more in each individual transaction. But what is the cost of, like, continuing to allow business to go even during times like this? Like, that's where it pays off.
Yeah. That's really, I think that's a big bonus, a big positive for us. So let's see, just a couple. There's just some comments. From YouTube. R says it's almost like businesses need a dedicated fluctuating price supply person now to check things. Absolutely.
that could be almost from the words of one of our people here. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a daily thing at this point. It's like, all right, let's get up and see what the news has for today. No news today. Okay, good. And then, but still, like, it's Stacy on our team is posting, I don't know, in the vicinity of like a dozen changes per day of communications that are coming back from our suppliers that then we have to flow through to our longer term strategy. It's a lot of work on top of what is already a lot of work. It's just, this is chaos nobody asked for.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment too, and I hadn't thought about this. Astro Canuck on YouTube, they say, as for Canada, a great deal of product for Western Canada still comes through California or Seattle. Those, I'm going to say, sanctions still appear to be subject to, or I'm not quite sure, still appear to be subject to U.S. tariffs and affect our system builders. That's an interesting point, because we do now ship to Canada. Has the chaos just between us and Canada, has that had an effect on things as well?
A little bit, but not in like big material ways. Like we had some unexpected cost on like some operating system licenses. Definitely uncertainty there, but in that way, our cost to Canada, has gone up because we are producing this in the U.S. and then it's going to Canada. As for just like a shipping container that's like stopping by LA on the way to Canada, I thought that wasn't affected, but I don't know, maybe it is.
Yeah.
But certainly, if that product is being made in the U.S., doesn't matter where it's going after that. Just getting that product, the bill of material stuff into the U.S., that's where the cost is incurred. So it's going to go up no matter where it goes.
Wow. I think that about touches on all the important parts. So thank you, Jon, for publishing the blog post, for joining. I know this was kind of a special episode. We put this together really fast, and I appreciate you taking the time out of the day to be here for us and being so open and transparent about how we're navigating this, how this affects the industry as a whole. I think it's a rarity, sort of. I think a lot of times people play this really close to the chest, and I think it's really awesome of you to be willing to talk about this stuff so openly.
Yeah. Well, for anyone that wants to keep looking at that blog post, that was originally supposed to be a one and done, like here's what's happening on March 28th. But that has turned into more of like a dashboard of like what all is happening ongoing. And so if you ever want the Cliff Notes, I'm certainly not the most experienced resource in it, but what I do know is I have to figure this out for our business anyway. And so let's put it up as a dashboard. So if you just want to see the countries that are most affecting the PC industry, what the current tariff rate is, and that's on one side of the post. The other side of the post is, okay, what does that actually mean for like a motherboard price, for a video card price? I was out at like NAB talking with AMD or talking with NVIDIA and talking with Intel. And anytime I get information, I'm going to stick it up there. And that's where I learned things of like, okay, when I know that NVIDIA is going to absorb the tariffs on like RTX Pro cards, cool. Now we can have a plan. Now we can have this whole intention on that, and I'll put that up in the blog post. So if you want a one-stop shop, I just go there.
Yeah. So again, thank you, and thanks to the audience for tuning in. We normally do this the first or second Tuesday of the month, but this was a special thing we wanted to really talk about it because it was important. And so thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye.